Hi family, this is my own real story. My son locked me in the bathroom for 2 days. So I sold his house and left the country. Have you ever looked at someone you raised, someone you'd give your life for, and realized you don't recognize them anymore? That was the moment I stopped calling Ethan my son. It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind where the clouds seemed to hang low enough to touch. The air in the house was heavy, filled with the ghost of an argument that hadn't yet begun. Ethan had been distant for weeks, coming home late, avoiding my eyes at breakfast. His wife, Lena, used to stop by for coffee every Sunday, but she hadn't been here in months. I didn't need to ask why. Some silences are loud enough to tell their own stories. I'm Richard, 71, retired history teacher, widower, and apparently an uninvited guest in my own son's home. The house once belonged to me and my late wife, Margaret. When she passed, I gave it to Ethan. It was meant to be a start for his family, a symbol of trust. Funny how symbols turn to iron bars when love curdles into resentment. That morning, I made 2 cups of coffee, one for myself, one for him. He didn't take it. He just stood there, scrolling through his phone, his jaw tight. Rough night? I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up, eyes cold, almost mocking. You don't get to ask questions, Dad. That tone. It wasn't anger. It was contempt, the kind that builds when guilt has nowhere else to go. I'd heard rumors. Lena had called once, her voice shaking. He's not the man you think he is, Richard. Then she hung up before I could ask anything. That morning, when Ethan left his phone on the counter, I saw it light up. The message. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? No name. Just a heart emoji. I didn't mean to look, but once you've seen the truth, you can't unsee it. My stomach twisted. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just disappointed. I'd raised him to be better than this. When he caught me looking, his face darkened. You went through my phone? I didn't have to. It was right there, I said quietly. Ethan, what are you doing? You have a wife. A family. He stepped closer. Don't talk to me about family, he hissed. You think I don't know what kind of man you were? The saintly teacher who was never home when Mom was crying? I froze. His words cut deeper than I expected. Was this about me, or him? Before I could speak, he shoved me toward the bathroom. I stumbled back, confused. The door slammed. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot. Ethan, what are you doing? I shouted. No answer. Through the thin door, I heard his footsteps fade away, and then nothing. At first, I thought it was a joke. A cruel one, maybe, but still a joke. 2 hours passed. Then 6. The light under the door faded to darkness. My coffee had gone cold. When the second sunrise came through the tiny frosted window, I knew something inside me had changed forever. I never thought silence could scream, but after 2 days in that bathroom, I learned it could. Every creak of the pipes sounded like a voice I couldn't answer. Every hour that passed pulled old memories to the surface. Memories of the boy Ethan used to be, and the man I couldn't save him from becoming. He wasn't born cruel. When he was 8, he'd follow me around the garden, asking why leaves turned brown or why clouds looked heavy before rain. His laughter had warmth, the kind that made even Margaret smile through her worst days. But something shifted after her death. Grief, I suppose, has a way of hardening love into something unrecognizable. Margaret's passing was slow, cancer, the kind that steals time in pieces. Ethan was 24 then, married to Lena barely a year. I remember her holding Margaret's hand in the hospital, whispering prayers she didn't believe in. Lena was kind, gentle. She reminded me of the person Ethan used to be. After the funeral, Ethan changed. He blamed me, not outright, but in quiet, venomous ways. He said I'd cared more about work than family, that I'd abandoned them when they needed me most. Maybe he was right. I'd buried myself in history books, teaching about empires and wars while my own home was collapsing. But what I didn't see was how grief had turned Ethan inward, hungry for attention, validation, anything that made him feel alive again. When Lena became distant, drowning in her own sorrow, he found comfort elsewhere. I didn't know it then, but by the time I moved back into the house last spring, the cracks between them had become canyons. Living under the same roof again was supposed to heal us. Instead, it turned the air toxic. We avoided dinners together. Words became weapons. I'd hear whispered arguments at night, Lena's soft pleas, Ethan's sharp replies. Once, I heard a crash in her muffled sobs. When I confronted him the next morning, he brushed it off with a smirk. "You're too old to understand relationships, Dad. Stay out of mine." I wanted to believe he was just angry, that it was a phase. Fathers always think they can fix things with patience and a few good talks. But what patience can mend betrayal? A week before he locked me in that bathroom, I saw Lena on the porch. She looked pale, fragile, like she'd been carrying too many secrets. "He's not who you think he is," she whispered again. "If something happens, just know I tried." I asked what she meant, but she only shook her head and walked away. I didn't see her again. When Ethan left me in that locked room, I had hours, days, to think about those words. About the way he'd looked at me, not like a son looks at his father, but like a stranger holding a grudge older than he could explain. Maybe it wasn't just the affair. Maybe it was everything that came before, the unspoken disappointments, the inherited anger. Maybe I'd passed down more than my name. Maybe I'd given him my silence, my pride, my way of loving too late and too little. By the time I heard the lock click open again, I wasn't the same man who had entered that bathroom. Something in me had gone cold, deliberate, calculating. And as I stepped into the hallway, weak and hollow, one thought settled into my mind with chilling clarity. If Ethan could strip me of dignity, I could strip him of everything else. When I stepped out of that bathroom, the air felt different, heavier, colder, as if the house itself knew what had happened inside its walls. The world beyond the door hadn't changed, but I had. Something inside me had died, and in its place, a strange calm had taken root. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No footsteps. No clatter of dishes. No sound of Ethan's laughter, the hollow kind he used to fill the house with when he wanted to sound normal. I moved slowly through the hallway, each step echoing against the polished floorboards. My throat was dry, my stomach empty, but I didn't care about food or water. I cared about truth. Ethan's bedroom door was half open. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space that once belonged to a boy who used to dream of being a writer. His desk was buried under unopened bills, half-empty bottles, and something that made my pulse stop, a photograph. It was Lena, smiling in a red dress, the same one she'd worn at their anniversary dinner 2 years ago. But beside her wasn't Ethan. It was a woman, younger, unfamiliar, and standing far too close. Behind the picture, folded carefully, was a note in Lena's handwriting. "If you ever decide to tell him, I'll tell your father first." My chest tightened. Tell him what? I whispered to the empty room. Then I saw Ethan's phone on the bed, the same one that had betrayed him before. My hands trembled as I unlocked it with the password I knew too well, Margaret. Even in his cruelty, he couldn't let go of his mother. The messages were all there, threads of conversations with someone named Sierra. The tone was flirtatious, indulgent, but buried deep within was something else. A voice memo, dated 3 weeks ago. "You don't get it, Sierra. He acts like he's better than me. Like I owe him everything. That house should have been mine years ago. I'll make sure he regrets every word he's ever said to me." The air left my lungs. He wasn't just angry, he was planning this. The confinement, the humiliation, it wasn't a moment of rage. It was premeditated. I sat down on the edge of his bed, my reflection in the mirror opposite me trembling with disbelief. My son, my only son, had become a stranger capable of cruelty that once would have horrified him. And yet, beneath the anger, a small voice inside me whispered, "You made him this way." I remembered every moment I'd chosen distance over affection, every time I'd thought discipline mattered more than understanding. Ethan had inherited my pride, but none of my restraint. He was a reflection warped by years of silence. Still, grief doesn't absolve cruelty. I owed him forgiveness once. Not anymore. Over the next few days, I played the part of a quiet ghost. Ethan came home only at night, moving through the house without a word. I listened to him laugh on the phone, flirt, lie, the sound of it all grinding at my nerves like sandpaper. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Revenge, I'd learned in 71 years, only works when it's patient. While he slept, I began going through old files, property papers, mortgage documents, account details. The house was still legally under my name. I had transferred ownership to him informally but never finalized the deed. One signature, mine, could decide everything. As I stared at the papers, I realized I wasn't trembling anymore. The fear had melted into resolve. He'd taken my dignity. I'd take his legacy. When I folded the documents back into the drawer, I glanced toward his room. He was asleep, snoring softly, unaware that his entire life was about to shift. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not out of joy, but out of certainty. The morning I decided to sell the house, the sky looked exactly as it had the day Margaret died, a dull gray that seemed to hang just above the rooftops, too heavy for light to break through. It felt poetic in a cruel sort of way. This home, once filled with her laughter, had become a monument to everything I'd lost, and everything Ethan had destroyed. I didn't rush. Revenge shouldn't feel rushed. It should be deliberate, graceful, almost ceremonial. I spent 3 days preparing. I cleaned every room, polished the furniture, even trimmed the dying roses in the front yard. Each task felt like a farewell, a ritual cleansing of the ghosts that haunted these walls. The paperwork was simple. The house was still legally mine, a fact Ethan had either forgotten or chosen to ignore. I signed it over to a real estate agency that afternoon. The manager, a polite woman named Clara, smiled when she saw the property details. "A place like this won't stay on the market for long," she said. She was right. Within 48 hours, the deal was done. Cash offer. No inspection. Sold. Just like that, the house that had carried 3 generations of my family no longer belonged to the name carved into the mailbox. That evening, Ethan came home later than usual. I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping tea, the house papers neatly folded beside me. He tossed his keys onto the counter and gave me a look of weary irritation. "You're still here?" he muttered. "I was waiting for you," I said evenly. He poured himself a drink, pretending not to care. "If this is another lecture, spare me." "It's not," I said, sliding the folded documents across the table. "It's a goodbye." He frowned, hesitating before picking them up. As he read, the color drained from his face. "What is this?" he demanded. "The sale agreement," I said quietly. "The house is no longer yours." He laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You can't do that." "I already did." For a long moment, there was only silence, then a flicker of something I hadn't seen in years, panic. The mask of arrogance slipped. Beneath it, he was just a frightened man who'd built his identity on something he never truly owned. "You think this makes us even?" he said through clenched teeth. "You think this fixes what you did to Mom? What you did to me?" And then, there it was. The truth he'd been carrying like a loaded weapon. He dropped the papers on the floor and glared at me. "She told me everything before she died. About the affair. The nights she cried when you didn't come home. You made her feel worthless. I watched her die thinking she wasn't enough for you." His voice broke, raw with years of buried pain. "You don't get to play the victim now." I swallowed hard. The words hit me like a slap, but they didn't change what I'd done or what he'd become. "Maybe I failed her," I said softly. "But I didn't fail you. You failed yourself." For a second, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he turned away, gripping the counter, breathing hard. When he finally spoke again, his voice was a whisper. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere far," I said. "Somewhere your anger can't find me." As I walked toward the door, he didn't try to stop me. The silence between us felt final, almost sacred, the end of something that had rotted long before this day. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of rain again. I didn't look back. Some houses aren't meant to be homes forever. Some sons aren't meant to be forgiven. I left before dawn. The house was still and dark when I locked the front door for the last time. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound left to witness my departure. My old leather suitcase, cracked at the corners, sat in the hallway beside me. It was the same one Margaret and I had used on our honeymoon. I didn't take much. Just clothes, my passport, and a photograph of the three of us, back when we were still pretending to be happy. By the time Ethan would wake up, I'd be gone. And by the time he realized the money from the sale had already transferred to an overseas account, I'd be halfway across the Atlantic. I didn't feel triumphant. Revenge doesn't give you that kind of satisfaction. It's quieter, colder. It's the calm after the storm, the eerie silence where you can finally hear yourself think and wish you couldn't. I settled in Lisbon, in a small apartment overlooking the sea. The city had an old, weary beauty, much like me. Mornings were slow, filled with the smell of coffee and salt, and nights were for thinking, for remembering, for regretting. Sometimes, I'd walk to the harbor and watch fathers teaching their sons how to tie knots or cast lines. I'd tell myself I didn't envy them, that I'd done what needed to be done. But that was a lie I repeated to keep myself from collapsing under the weight of it all. A month after I arrived, a letter came. No return address, just my name written in Ethan's sharp handwriting. I kept it on the table for 3 days before opening it. "You always said I'd learn the hard way. Maybe you were right. The house doesn't matter. None of it does. I hope you find whatever peace you've been chasing all your life. Just know I'm done chasing you." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't hatred either. It was emptiness, the same kind that had been between us for years. I folded the letter and placed it inside the same envelope as Margaret's photograph. Some wounds don't heal, they just stop bleeding. In the weeks that followed, I began writing, not to publish, just to remember. Pages filled with confessions I'd never spoken aloud. The nights I'd ignored my wife's tears. The years I'd let Ethan's silence harden. The moment I realized revenge was only another name for grief. Because that's what it truly was, grief, disguised as justice. I told myself I'd taken back my dignity, but what I'd really taken was another piece of my soul. Sometimes I dream of the house. In the dream, the lights are on. I hear laughter, Margaret's, Lena's, even Ethan's, echoing through the hallways. I try to enter, but the door won't open. I'm always on the outside, watching through the glass, unable to step back into a life I've already burned. And when I wake, the sea outside my window feels like punishment and mercy all at once, endless, forgiving, and cruel. One morning, while watching the sunrise, I met an old man on the pier. He was sketching the water, his hands trembling slightly. We talked about weather, about aging, about how time doesn't really heal, it just teaches you how to carry pain differently. Before leaving, he said something that stayed with me. You can't build peace on ashes. You have to let the wind take them. That night, I took out Margaret's photograph and Ethan's letter. I walked down to the edge of the sea. The tide was high, the water cold against my skin. For a long time, I just stood there holding both pieces of my past. Then slowly I let them go. The envelope drifted out, caught by the current, spinning gently until it disappeared beneath the waves. I thought I'd feel sorrow, maybe guilt. Instead, I felt light. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close. I turned back toward the city, the lights flickering along the coastline like faint promises. I knew I'd never see Ethan again. Maybe that was for the best. Sometimes, love can't survive its own history. But every now and then, when the wind carries the scent of rain, I remember the sound of the lock clicking shut, the cold bathroom tiles, and my son's voice echoing through the door. Not as a curse anymore, but as a reminder. Because in the end, the story wasn't about revenge or betrayal. It was about two men, bound by blood and broken by silence, who both forgot how to say the one word that might have saved them: sorry. And somewhere across the ocean, I like to think Ethan stands on his own balcony, watching a different sea, thinking the same thing. Sometimes I still hear the echo of that lock, not in the walls of that house, but in the quiet corners of my mind. It reminds me how easy it is for love to turn into a prison, and how the people we raise can one day become strangers holding the key. I've come to realize that forgiveness isn't a gift we give to others. It's a burden we release from ourselves. I carried anger like an heirloom, polishing it with every memory, feeding it with every regret. But revenge doesn't end pain. It only changes its shape. Ethan took 2 days of my freedom. I took his future. And now we both live as men without homes, haunted, hollow, and wiser too late. The sea outside my window still sings of what's gone, a quiet hymn for the things I loved and lost. I watch it and wonder if he ever thinks of me when the rain begins to fall. Perhaps someday he'll understand that I didn't sell a house to punish him. I sold it to bury the ghosts that lived inside it. And in doing so, I set us both free.